Hello, everybody. My name is Michaela Madrid. I'm an enrolled member of the Lower Brule Lakota Sioux Tribe, and I'm the Operations Manager for Sovereign Bodies Institute. Today, we have a conversation about trafficking in Native foster youth. You'll hear from the expertise of our wonderful Survivors Leadership Council. This webinar is part of our series for Trafficking Awareness Month. We've done a whole host of webinars, a poster series, and a PSA, all of which are available on our Facebook page and also on our website and YouTube pages. So this event is going to be a live Q&A session towards the end. So those of you who are tuning in on Facebook, please post any questions that you have in the comments and we'll do our best to get to them. So tonight, we've got a really great lineup for you. So what we'll do is we'll have each survivor come on and give a little bit of insight on who they are and their experiences with this topic. So if we could have Roxanne turn on your video and share for the audience. Thank you. You're muted. There you go.
Wanted me to introduce myself or?
Yeah, so we'll have you introduce yourself and then just kind of share what you'd like the audience to know about this topic.
Oh, okay. I'm Roxanne White. But I should introduce myself in one of my traditional languages, which is the Yakima Ichishkin language. Ink Nosh Waniksha, Roxanne White, Wash Nosh Kanik, Yakima Kunimi Pu, Ku Nuksat Ku, Anani, Grovant, Wichita, Coast Salish Territory, Seattle, Washington. My name is Roxanne White. I am Yakima, Nez Perce, Nooksack, and Grovant, Anani. And I presently reside here in Seattle on Coast Salish Territory. And so I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to thank everybody who's joining us tonight. This is a very, very important conversation that my sisters and I will be having tonight. It may get emotional. I may get emotional because we're going to be talking about things that we've either experienced, and I should speak in the I about me. I'm going to be talking about things that I've experienced in my lifetime. Experiences of being a child, a young girl. I grew up on the Yakima Indian Reservation, and I've lived there almost all my life. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. Let's see. I'm just a. I like the way that the Lakota people say, being a common person, a common man, a common woman. I'm no different, no better, no bigger than anybody. I'm just a Native woman in this world, doing my best to heal and grow and thrive and hopefully break cycles for my grandchildren and their grandchildren, and also to heal my sons. And I like to think that my healing will also bring healing to it will go backwards, to my ancestors and to my mother and my relatives in my community. So it's a great honor to be a part of this conversation, to be amongst loving, caring sisters, strong sisters like Rachel, Chelsea, and Lissa, and Michaela. I am so appreciative to Sovereign Bodies Institute and to the rest of the sisters of the Survivors Leadership Council. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because, in this work, that in this life, in this movement, what I've seen a lot of, uh, especially this whole month, is a lot of work around trafficking, around prostitution, uh, and all these things, and these conversations not really being led by Native women, and I think that it is important that we lead this conversation, that especially coming from from having the lived experience, you know. And so I'm really grateful for this time, and I hope that you all feel comfortable enough to ask any questions. You know, if there's something that we can help shed light to, each one of us has our own experiences. So again, I just want to say thank you. And when I say lived experience, I think it's important. You know, I think sometimes I think that everybody knows what I've been through. So in going into a little bit about who I am, uh, I am a survivor of sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence. Um, I was abducted from my home at the age of 4 and assaulted by more than 2 men. Um, and and I was also trafficked by a family member at the age of 22. Um, you know, the things that I've experienced in my life, battling and you know, addiction, self-medicating through trauma for about 32 years, which, you know, I'm grateful to say that today I have 6 years. Wait. Yeah. Is it 6 years? I think I'm coming up. Yeah, 6 years. And let me see. Sorry about that. I don't want to get it wrong, but I've been clean and sober since August, uh, August 26th of 2014. And, you know, which gives me a lot of, it allowed me to heal, it allowed me to grow. And so let me just get that right. I've been clean and sober now for 6 years, 5 months, and 3 days. And so, you know, that is a big part of my story, being clean and sober and being able to actually start the healing process. And I too get therapy. I've been getting trauma therapy now for going on 4 years. And it's been extremely helpful on my journey. I have a sponsor. I host and secretary women's and Native women's AA meeting every Wednesday on Zoom. So I think that, you know, I bring all these things to the table because I think it's good to show that that I'm working on myself, and even with all that, I still battle depression and I still have PTSD and these sort of things. But it's an ongoing work, right? I'm an ongoing work in progress. Um, you know, my 2 sons are on their journeys, and so I think that's what it is for me about being a Native woman, is that my family's not perfect. There's still a lot of struggles in my family, and same struggles as many of you, um, you know, that us Natives know about in our own communities. And we have a lot of resiliency, a lot of beauty, a lot of culture, you know, family, and yet we still have these other things that we're also still combating, that most people, um, I think, don't really know or see. And it's, we're in a time right now where we're just breaking those barriers, and we're breaking our silence, and we're coming out and we're speaking on things that that was taught to our grandmother ancestors to not speak, to not say anything. And so today we're breaking all of those things that colonizers tried to impress upon us, and take our voice away and silence us, and we're speaking out. So welcome to tonight's conversation. Katiayo.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Roxanne. And yes, it's so important to hear from survivors themselves, which is something that we really pride ourselves in at SBI to really uplift. So next, we're going to hear from Chelsea. So Chelsea, if you could give a little introduction about who you are and just kind of your thoughts and experiences on this topic of trafficking in Native foster youth.
Dos, nanana, na hase hise, na anagach, hanane nina, na chuper, Hello, my relatives. My name is Chelsea Hendrickson. I'm an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho Tribe from the Wind River Reservation in Ethity, Wyoming. And I'm also Chupe from Macoyac, Alaska, and I'm also a Chilisto Corporation shareholder. If you are keeping up with what's going on with Sovereign Bodies Institute lately, you probably already know a little bit about me, but I'll go down the line for what I do. So I work full-time as a program assistant for the Pathways to Healing program with the Cowlitz Tribal Health Clinic in Tukwila, Washington, here in Tukwila, Washington. And I'm also a youth advocate at United Indians of All Tribes Foundation at their Lavatia Youth Home. Lavatia Youth Home is a 25-bed co-ed transitional housing for Native youth ages 18 to 24. So that's what I do. And I've been working at the youth home for about 6 years now. I work there part-time. It's my second job. Starting as a youth advocate there was my first step into social work world. And Lavatia will always have a soft spot in my heart. I love Lavatia so much, but we only have 15 minutes and I have so much to say in 15 minutes. I don't know. So what, when we're talking about trafficking and Native youth, you know, for me, there's always the core, the foundation of something. For me, these issues that Auntie Roxy was just now talking about that we're going through in Indian country, our unsheltered relatives, human trafficking, MMIW, MMIP, all these things that Sovereign Bodies Institute talks about and the work that we do, for me, is simply rooted in white supremacy and the colonization of our territories, right? So when I think about trafficking and I think about Native youth and I think about you know, why, you know, all the issues that we got today, why, you know, I'm also like low-key a product of that also. It goes back to contact with Columbus. It goes back to colonization. It goes back to dehumanization of indigenous peoples. It goes back to white folks not even looking at us as human beings. Because if you don't look at us, if we're subhuman and we're not human beings, you get to traffic us, you get to steal our land, and that's how we become unsheltered. That's how we become homeless. That's why, you know what I mean? Like that's why we're a low percentage of the population of America, right? Because genocide was the initial plan. Let's kill them all off, which they did a pretty darn good job, right? There's only what, like 3 million, you know, indigenous peoples. But so we're a low percentage of the population in America, but we're a high percentage of all these things that I just now pointed out. Suicide, you know, unsheltered relatives, trafficking, sex trafficking, you know, all these things, where the disparity between us and the population and us and the statistics is really high. And all, like I said, it all goes back to colonization, all goes back to white supremacy. I could sit here for 2 hours and talk about and give a timeline leading up to that, right? But I'm not. I just want to start it off with that. But then we really got to think about, you know, why there's such a huge population of youth, why a large population of our unsheltered indigenous relatives are youth, right? And we got to think back to for these reasons. I just really want to highlight the boarding school era. You know what I mean? When genocide wasn't an option no more, when society started turning around and say, hey, it's not cool to murder an entire race because they're brown, because they're indigenous, because they're different, because they're not white, we have to do something, right? So the boarding school era started, and the motto of the whole thing, right, was kill the Indian, save the man. So if that's what you're leading with, you know what I mean? If genocide is not the option, now you're leading with kill the Indians, save the man. And we're literally kidnapping children. My ancestors were kidnapped to be taken to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania for for the sole purpose of breaking them down, breaking down our cultures, our families, our way of life, our languages, everything that makes us us, right? Everything that makes us beautiful, right? That's a perfect, it's you know, you can't talk about what's happening in the present without looking about at the past. You cannot know where you're going in the future without looking in the past, right? So for me, that's I always gotta like premise and preface with that, you know what I mean? White supremacy, boarding schools. You know, you fast forward a little bit, you got the Indian Child Welfare Act, I don't know what year, 1970 something, right? I'm not good with numbers. I think you guys heard me say that too before. I'm horrible with numbers and years and what simple math. But anyways, so when you think back to ICWA, which I want to say is like the only Supreme Court, it's the only law that's like based off of like race or something, or like it's, somebody might have to help me out, but it's a very specific law that stopped the kidnapping of children, and more specifically like Plains Native children, because we were being kidnapped so much from our homes. They literally had to create a law and say, hey, this isn't cool no more. Even though it was cool when we were killing you guys, when we were trying to commit genocide, when we had over, the US government had over 300 boarding schools in the US. And we don't know about that. We were taught this in school, right? We don't, you know, because this is something that America don't want to talk about. So we can't talk about our homeless Native youth and trafficking of homeless Native youth without talking about boarding schools, without talking about genocide, without talking about ICWA, right? And if you don't know about those things, you know, it's quick Google search. That'll help you out. What else do I want to mention? So Labatia Youth Home, like I love Labatia so much. Like I said, it holds such a good place in my heart, and that's because I myself was in all girls group home when I was 16 years old. Shout out Fremont County Girls Group Home in Lander, Wyoming. I had an amazing experience there. Obviously, I wasn't there for the greatest reasons. You know, family was in dysfunction back then. All us kids, me and my siblings got split up, and I ended up in a group home. And it was an interesting experience, you know what I mean? For me, looking back at my youth and being a homeless youth and being in the system and going through group homes, I wasn't necessarily in foster care. The one things that I remember from back then that stood out to me was the good people that worked there. So I always strive to try to be a good youth advocate, because of my experience of dealing with bad advocates and good advocates. There wasn't like real horrible ones, but those are the things I remember, the ones that I could relate to, that I could connect with. And I just remember thinking back then, like there was just normalized dysfunction, right? The pressure to have sex, pressure to be hypersexualized. Like if you were Native or you didn't come from a good family or blah, 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 like there was just normalized this, you were surrounded by normalized dysfunction. So, you know, having to grow up really fast, having to, you know, be hypersexualized because I was Native, and be looked at a certain way and being pressured from people around me to have sex. That was a huge issue for me as a Native youth. So when I think now of my where I work now, so United Indians of All Tribes Foundation started Labatia Youth Home in Seattle about 20 years ago, and that was through the takeover of Fort Lawton, right? So if you don't know about Seattle history, Coast Salish history, that's another good thing to Google, takeover of Fort Lawton. Amazing organization, shout out UIATF. They do amazing work in the community up here, amazing history. But to me, I love working there because it's this huge home that was built in like 1920s. It's like 3 floors, 25, like I said, 25 bed, co-ed, ages 18 to 24. You know, when I first started working there, I was like, man, I wish I could have been in this group home when I was in group homes. And I was like, man, I wish like, they have such amazing connection to the community. People in the community come in to teach, come in to spend time, come in to carve. Elders come in. They have elders lunch and they do live cooking shows, and they do really amazing work. But I still see so much potential. Even though Labatia has been open for 20 years, I still see there's so much potential there. and everything in the program and leadership. Like, I love working for the Labatia Youth Home. I feel like a lot of things that I see, that feedback that I get from Native youth that I come in contact with there is I mean, even though there's a lot of cultural components, they want more. They always want more people to come in to teach them to dance, teach them to sing, teach them to teach them, you know, all these things. And just having that connection. I notice when people get hired at Labatia, like non-Native people, like they just act funny. I don't know. Like, the best advice I can give people who work with youth who have been trafficked or abused, like, just treat them normal. Like, I feel like I see a lot of youth advocates come in and I don't know, they take their position too seriously, or they act too like of an authority figure, like trying to boss the youth around in the youth, and that makes them want to leave. What, you know what I mean? That's not going to make the youth want to hang around. So just treat them normal, treat them like your friend. You know what I mean? And that's probably why I have such a great relationship, and I love it so much, is because I wish I had that when I was in the system, right? Some other things I want to talk about. So when we're talking about the trafficking of Native youth, you know, I was 19 when I was targeted by a pimp who specifically came to my reservation to prey on young Indian girls because of a lot of reasons, right? Easy access, easy targets, loopholes in the laws, you can get away with this kind of stuff. So this is a huge issue. When we're talking about trafficking of Native youth, this is a huge issue. That's another reason why I love living in Seattle. Shout out Duwamish tribe, land bank. Because there's such an amazing such a vibrant urban Native community here that recognizes these issues that's happening in our community, and we're really on the forefront of making these huge changes. Like Chief Seattle Club, shout out Chief Seattle Club and the Coalition to End Urban Indigenous Homelessness. Eagle Village, you know, Seattle's on the forefront of, and they're all Native-led organizations, really taking the time to highlight these issues and make changes. So Eagle Village just opened up last year in Seattle. It's housing specifically for Natives. They just started a coalition to end urban Indigenous homelessness in Seattle. They're doing huge, major things. Chief Seattle Club, I grew up going to Chief Seattle Club here in Seattle, which is a place for unsheltered relatives and just Natives to go to be in community, to eat, to visit, to, you know what I mean? It's a special place for us. You know, they're really doing amazing things. But what I noticed on the res, like my experience of being on the res and being a Native youth, being in a group home on the res, like I said, when the white people there that live there don't look at you as human, they feel they could do these things to you. And it's crazy to me, like racist people piss me off so bad. Like it really, oh my God. Like they really, so it's like, I don't even try to have conversations with racist people no more, because if you can't agree with me that the foundation of these problems are rooted in colonization and white supremacy, then there's no conversation to be had. I'm not gonna sit here and argue with you, you know what I mean? So when I think about to the boarding school era, right? So they don't even want to believe that, like that wasn't bad. Like I come across a lot of people that maybe don't, like, not only do they not know nothing about boarding school era, maybe they don't believe it, or they think that that was a happy time for us. It wasn't, you know what I'm saying? They're like, and then you think about the residential schools in Canada where we had a lot of the same experiences, but they would literally put out ads in the newspaper. So when we think about the Allotment Act, right? They're giving our land away for free, wanting settlers to come and to take our land, and putting ads in the newspaper saying free land come west, right? And then I also think about the boarding school eras where they're putting ads in the newspaper for children. So like in the 40s, 1920s, 1970s, you know, there'd be ads in newspapers all throughout Canada and through the Plains Nations like $10 for this kid, or churches would send out letters to white folks in their community, say, hey, if you give us $10, you can have this kid. And it's their culture, right? It's white folks' culture to think that they're a white savior and they're gonna buy a kid. And like, this is, so when we think of our normalized dysfunction, that's their normalized dysfunction. That's their culture, is to steal children and to kidnap. And so that's why I have such huge issues with like white folks that don't see that, or won't even do the research. Like a quick Google search will show you all this history, you know what I'm saying? So those are things I just want to really highlight, that a lot of these issues are rooted in, you know, white supremacy, colonization, and our history. I also just watched a really amazing documentary the other day on Amazon Prime. It's called The Long Ride Home. I highly encourage everybody to watch that. It's about residential school survivors and their connection after being kidnapped and taken, them trying to find their culture again. It was a really amazing and empowering and uplifting story. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, I was just on Instagram today, and I love Native youth. I love Native youth and how they're taking over TikTok, how they're taking over Instagram, and even more specifically TikTok. I love that we're changing the narrative, that we're taking our stories and we're flipping that and we're creating art, and it's amazing. So I saw a TikTok today. It was so dope, by an influencer called Land Back Baddie, and you could go follow them on my Instagram also. And I was scrolling today because I was trying to do a little bit of research, which wasn't a whole lot. I'm a procrastinator, but I had to screenshot their TikTok because they wanted to, this influencer on TikTok from Canada, the name is Land Back Baddie. They wanted to highlight that January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and they did a TikTok of themselves. And at the end of the TikTok, it says, did you know that 1 in 3 houseless LGBTQ two-spirit youth will be recruited by a trafficker within 48 hours of being on the street? Did you know that 46% of houseless LGBTQ two-spirit youth ran away from home due to family rejection? Did you know that more than half of houseless LGBTQ two-spirit youth will be sexually assaulted while living on the streets? And it's not just girls. 10% of underage LGBTQ two-spirit gay, bisexual, and trans men are detained for prostitution. And at the end, it says, love your children for who they are. So also, when we live in a colonized world where not only have they broken down those family structures and our way of life and our gender, how we look, cut our hair, our languages, you know what I mean? That's another effect of that, is us shunning our two-spirit relatives. And I do notice that they are disproportionately affected. I always think back to my friends on the res. Like, I had 2 really amazing friends that were two-spirit, George Brown and Wes Shakespeare. They're really so amazing. And they both passed away at a really young age, like in their 20s or something like that, for like real senseless reasons, like maybe an overdose and like drinking or something like that. But I always think back to their stories and how people viewed them and how they were treated, even on the res in our community, because of the colonization, the boarding schools, and that being beat into us. We now shame our two-spirit relatives, and we shame our LGBTQ, relatives and trans relatives, when in reality, those are traditional healers and traditional medicine people, and people has, specific special medicine. And, nobody just called themselves two-spirit. That was just something that was within them that you could see, you know what I'm saying? So I really want to highlight that while over the 6 years of working at La Batia, a huge population has been two-spirit LGBTQ relatives coming into the youth home. And I have a lot of what they have told me is about those statistics that I've just read. They've been trafficked, they've been sexually assaulted while on the streets, and being shunned from their family for choosing to be who they are and loving themselves. So shout out to our two-spirit relatives. I just want to uplift them. What else did I want to talk? I think that was probably 15 minutes. I could probably sit here all night, but I'm not. I won't bore you guys. I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, thanks so much. You have so much to share. We appreciate
That was
everything.
all over the place.
Oh, no, you're great.
Anyways.
So next we'll have Lissa come on the screen. Lissa, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and then share the kind of talking points that you wish to share about trafficking in Native foster youth.
You can't even see me, can you? Can you see me?
We can see you enough.
Okay. I can't even see if you can you, well, you obviously can hear me. All right. I'm Lissa Yelberg Chase, and I'm the founder of Spanish Scouts. We do a lot of cases with our missing and murdered. And we've had a lot of success, and we have a lot of supporters and followers and contributors. And this is really all hands on deck type of situation when we're talking about our missing and murdered. So one of the things that I'd like to share two things with you, and I think who was before me, Rachel? Anyway, when she was speaking about two spirits, so I want to share a couple stories with you. One being, so in my community, what I do is I've been fighting a battle here. One of the things is to make sure our community is doing okay, and so I've been working on this fight with the opiates that is taking lives left and right here. So I've been going around giving Narcan, doing things like that, trying to implore families to make a stance at saving our loved ones and our community members. So that's one of the things. Excuse me. We had an incident up here where a young person was taken to treatment, and I also do that. Took this person to treatment, and they were kicked out within a couple days. I live on Fort Berthold Reservation, and the treatment center that they were taken to was a local place in Minot, North Dakota, which is about 100 miles from us. Well, when this patient slash client reached out to me, they had told me that they had been discharged unsuccessfully from their treatment program. So, I'm on point. I jump in the car, run up there to go get this person. And when I pulled up, and this is a two-spirit female, I pull up to the hospital right there in the front, and she's standing outside with her suitcase and smoking a cigarette on her phone. And I had a big problem with that. She gets in the car, and I asked her, could you please sign a release for me? I just want to. So we went up to medical records, and we had a hard time getting the medical records. Now, first, I have a position here in the segment to do work. And so we went to get her medical information, and the hospital was refusing to release her medical information either to myself or to her. Said it was going to take up to 30 days, blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the problems I have with that was they did an intake. They did a mental health assessment. They knew exactly where she was from. They knew that there could have been chemical dependency, suicidal ideation, all this, because they're the ones that evaluated it. And yet, when she was thrown out, she was basically escorted to the door. There's only one thing that would have needed to happen, and that would be for a trafficker or a drug dealer or somebody to go by and see a vulnerable person standing outside that hospital, and we would have been looking for her next. You don't kick somebody out 100 miles from home and leave them to the elements, especially in the winter. And so I have a big problem with that. I did explain to the hospital that does definitely makes them a part of the problem. So when it comes to trafficking, you know, I'm always looking for situations like that. That's at the beginning of the scope there. But more related to this topic here is foster care. Um, a lot of you know that I have recently become a foster parent, and it's been an interesting ride. Now, I heard someone talk about ICWA. I heard about, you know, colonization and, you know, all these fancy terms that we use a lot. But I'm going to tell you what happened to my foster kids. Um, their tribe, which is not where I'm at, I'm not from there. They asserted jurisdiction over these boys, and they took them out of a good foster home that was non-native and placed them with me, at their request, and here they are. They've been here for going on 6 months. Um, there's never been one foster care dollar received. There's never been one phone call made on the behalf of the welfare of these kids. Um, there has not been one inquiry. There has not been one medical card given for their well-being. Um, and so I'm seeing an entirely new corner of the missing and murdered aspect of what we deal with on the daily. As far as I'm concerned, these kids have been erased from the system. Not one person is checking on them. And that's concerning. Uh, we know that Indigenous children are more likely to end up kidnapped by the foster care system. But what of our tribes doing? They're asserting a jurisdictional issue. And basically, as far as I'm concerned, at this point right now, all the interested parties are guilty of neglect, abuse, and abandonment. And this is very, very concerning to me. Um, who places a child with no medical? I don't have the resources nor the wherewithal to get any medical appointments, to get any. I'm lucky they're in school. They have medical needs. One needs glasses. There's therapeutic issues that we need, and we are not provided with the tools to give any quality of care. So again, I had a court hearing at their tribe at the beginning of the month. Um, now there's supposed to be respite. My son-in-law passed away. I needed to go to that funeral and had to, I should have respite. The tools that you need to bring these kids into safety and welfare, you know, and this is a terrible situation. So I showed up to the court hearing. I was given notice by accident. I show up to the court hearing. Nobody showed up but the judge. I traveled to another state, clear across this state into another state. Um, the judge showed up 40 minutes late. Other than that, anybody who says that they are concerned or interested party in this matter didn't even call in. So again, these children have literally been erased. Um, I don't know. It makes me nauseated to think if they would have landed in the wrong hands, what would have happened by now. Um, so with that being said, I think our tribal communities need an overhaul as well. There's no accountability. Um, we have untrained staff, um, and there's a genuine lack of concern for the welfare of these kids, like I said. So I've had them over 6 months now, and I'm winging it. I'm winging it with nothing. So I do not have too much. I was always against foster care to begin with. I was happy about ICWA. Um, I was an ICWA baby. I was happy that ICWA was able to assert itself to get involved and get me back. But what about these boys? I think they have done more of a disservice to these young boys than anything. And you know, if a mother were out on the streets and didn't have medical for these kids, they would be considered medical neglect, educational neglect. They have all these different labels that they put on when you're not being a good parent. However, when the tribe asserts its authority, it becomes the parents' portray of these children, and these children have been neglected and abandoned. So I know there is an even wider scope of what's going on. These kids could have been murdered and nobody would know. These kids could have been being molested, um, and nobody has called. And I'm just beside myself to this moment, that this is even happening. And to me, of all people. So yeah, it looks like legal recourse time. And it's sad that we have to spend more energy trying to get the resources that are supposed to be entitled to these kids, when we could be spending that energy helping them to get better. And that's basically all I have, unless anybody has some questions.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, and we're just so grateful that those kids found you and that they're able to be loved by you. So thank you for the work that you do with them. So next we'll have Rachel come on the screen. Rachel, again, if you could introduce yourself and just kind of share your experiences with this topic.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Ibarra. I am speaking to you from the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe Miwok people, otherwise known as Sacramento, California. Thank you, Chelsea, Lissa, and Roxanne, for all of your comments and your experience and the work that you do for our people and our communities. My current position, which is my day job, I am a CSEC case manager for youth and foster care here in Sacramento County. And a lot of the same issues, you know, that Roxanne and Chelsea were talking about for the on-ramps of exploitation. That's what we see here in the urban setting. I think what's different, you know, of course, the pathway into foster care, which is the same pathway into trafficking, would be alcohol and drugs, suicide or loss of a parent, rape, either trafficking in their own families, which brought them into foster care, domestic violence, and child abuse. As we know, youth who have been child abused are already groomed, and that grooming process begins at a very young age. So when they meet somebody on the street who wants to offer them all of these, you know, hopes and dreams, it's not unusual for them to, this is very familiar to them, so it's not unusual for them to engage.
Oh, Rachel, we lost your audio. I think you might have frozen. All right, so it looks like Rachel's having a few technical oh, there you are.
Am I frozen? Okay.
Now you're back. You had just started talking, so you might want to just start.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Did you get the on-ramps of exploitation?
Yes.
Okay. So, like I said, a lot of the same common issues are what we see, you know, the colonization, all the things that are happening in our communities that we see on a daily basis. That happens in an urban setting as well. The difference is the recruitment here in an urban setting for youth is their peer recruitments. And so youth that are their same age recruit them into sex trafficking. There's a lot of online trafficking specifically Instagram. That's how they get connected to pimps or other peers who are doing the same thing to make some quick money. I really appreciate what Lissa brought up as far as the accountability of our tribes. And what I see a lot is that when the youth is displaced for whatever reason, if the tribe is in South Dakota or in Northern California and the youth is here in Sacramento, if the tribe doesn't have the funding and cannot, engage or offer services, that's one thing. But some of the things that I'm seeing specifically for a lot of our Native youth that are absolutely disappearing off the map, which is a perfect recipe for MMIW, is that these youth, their identities are confidential. So because they're minors, nobody knows who they are. And when there's an opportunity for the child to get enrolled into the tribe is not budging. And that's for several reasons. Either enrollment is not happening right now, or they're disenrolled and there's no way to switch it around, or the tribe is backlogged with enrollment. And so recently we just came across a case to where a Native child had the opportunity to get enrolled, but the tribe said that they're backlogged and the child will be enrolled in June. But the case had gone so far into court that they needed to move on because legally they could not stall anymore. So what happened is that child got adopted out to a white family. In June, the child is eligible now, but in June, the tribe will be able to be caught up on their books to open it to enroll this kid. What happens in situations like that is that, the kids are displaced from the communities, from their culture, from the tradition, and any elders or family that they had a connection to while visiting tribal people or their communities before the adoption took place. That seems to be an easy fix. I don't know, because I'm not part of each tribe that has this process. But like Lissa was saying, when a youth is out of placement, in my case, when there is a child who runs away, they call that AWOL, their medical coverage is stopped. And what happens is, the youth who are trafficked, should they get pregnant, an STI, or beat up, or even raped, they have to go to an emergency room. And when they go to the emergency room calls the social worker. And sometimes that triggers a warrant, and then the youth is incarcerated. And so what happens is they're starting to be punished and they're criminalized for normal behavior. And normal behavior does look like sometimes throwing a tantrum and running away for, a day or coming back that same night. They're often punished for the trauma that they experience. And when I say that, a lot of the youth that I work with have complex PTSD and complex trauma. It's a bunch of different types of layers. When they start going through their therapeutic process, sometimes it flips them out. And sometimes they have a really hard time dealing with a lot of those things and things that come up, triggering memories, triggering behaviors. And so they run. And when they run, some of the times they come back to the group home, that means. And when they come back, though, they're punished. And that looks like a report that's written up that is sent to the social worker, that is then sent to the court saying, this kid is not doing well in this placement, and we're going to have to move her again. When the youth is moved from the community in which they know their family or community members, extended family, or even friends, they will be moved to a completely different region. So for instance, we're in Sacramento, they'll be moved to Riverside. And when they're moved to Riverside into a group home, that causes more harm because they're in a place where there's strangers. They have no idea what the landscape is. They don't know the safe places or the drop-in centers. And oftentimes they make their way back to Sacramento. Now, the degree of danger that they are placed in when they find their way back from Southern California to Northern California to Sacramento, it's extraordinary, and it is unheard of, some of the things that these youth experience going place to place, traveling long distances just to get home. And when I say home, I mean the places that if they're in foster care in Sacramento County, that's what they consider home, not an actual physical foster home, a family to call their own, or even a group home. I do see a lot of programs that don't offer spiritual and cultural or traditional services. It's not approved by CPS. When the families are still connected, let's say the kids are removed for whatever reason, but their families are still in reunification, CPS and DCFAS do not approve culturally competent programming, grassroots programming. So what that does is it sets our families back, because they have to go through the tribal curriculum and graduate that curriculum, and then go through the county curriculum. So that's double the time that is away from maybe kids that are already at home from their jobs. And it's also double the money that they'll have to pay in some instances. So a lot of the Native families that I see, they're not set up for success. And yeah, there's accountability when it has to come to the parents and taking care of the children. But at the same time, there's also a huge barrier, several barriers that are created by the system. We often have leaders in the Native community locally that will do anything that they possibly can to support these youth. But those leaders get tired, and what we need are people to step up and do the work themselves in order to serve some of these youth. I mean, I think, self-care as a provider is unheard of for some of us, and some of us are just getting into that practice. If we have our own traumas, we often will bleed on other people if we don't take care of them or address them ourselves. And that is real. That happens more than people actually think that it does. I see it all the time. There is also a complete disconnect from the child that is removed from, like, say they're adopted out at a young age and they just stay in foster care through their teen years. They have no knowledge about their tribe at all, and they want it, but there's no way for them to get it. Oftentimes, if the tribe can't help the youth because they're out of county or network and it's a funding issue, that youth ends up basically just hoping that somebody will, show them the way. But a lot of times they end up giving up. Some of the kids on my caseload, I will say, hey, I heard, you're enrolled in this tribe. And they say, oh yeah, but I don't do that. And I said, what do you mean you don't do that? Well, I mean, I just don't do that. I don't do any of that. And what they mean is they don't participate or know anything about the tribe or the culture. Some of them aren't even interested in learning anymore. They want to be completely disconnected. I do have youth that I work with who, let's say the mother is the enrolled tribal member, and that's how they are enrolled. But because the mom is out of the picture for whatever reason, the child wants nothing to do with the culture at all. Some of them don't have any idea what tribe they are when they come onto my case. And so, we will do some work around, I ask them and ask if they want to explore it at all. Eventually they do, but not always. It's not always something that they want to jump into. It's not the first thing on their mind. One of the things that I do see that I have actually never seen, I should say, is that their traffickers are never Native American people. So it's kind of interesting in this urban setting that, I know on reservations there's a lot of Native on Native crime, but here in an urban setting, it's not like that at all. One
looks like we lost your audio again. We'll give it a minute to come back.
I froze.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
now we
Can
can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Did you hear the missing person part?
No, well, you had just kind of finished talking about trying to connect the kids with their tribe and not that sometimes they don't want to be part of the tribe because they're not
Okay.
connected.
So, and I'll close with this because I put a timer on and I only have 3 minutes left. One of the things that Lissa touched on as far as the invisibility of these youth that are targeted, when they run away from placement, nobody looks for them. The police don't look for them. Their social workers don't look for them. If they happen to commit a crime and get picked up, that's how they're found. Or if they choose to turn themselves in or come back, that's the only way we know that they're alive, unless they have an advocate who they have a strong relationship with. Other than that, when our youth go missing, nobody looks for them. So they completely are invisible and gone until we hear from them or about them again. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you definitely shared some really powerful, unfortunate realities of the system that we're currently in. And we just thank you for being an Indigenous social worker. I know that's difficult, so thank you for your work. So before we transition into our Q&A session, I'd like to welcome Roxanne to come back on the screen. And Roxanne, if you could share a little more about your experiences on this issue and just anything you'd like to leave the audience with.
Yes, thank you, Michaela. And wow, thank you, Lissa and Rachel and Chelsea. When we first started, I thought that I was giving more or less an opening intro. I was rushing through it. I sometimes have selective hearing. So I'm gonna go ahead and set a timer as well. All of this that each one of these sisters have shared has been the way that I come from this. So I have done some volunteer work with youth, not as much as I would like, but I do have a lot of adopted nieces, nephews. I have a lot of sisters in the community. I do collaborate and work with different organizations here in Seattle. And while everybody was talking, I was just going through so many emotions. So I know this is going to be a really impactful conversation for our community. My heart and prayers go out to all the youth and the families in our community, but these youth who don't have a choice. They don't have a choice in their circumstances, and also out to Lissa and her the children the boys that she's fostering in their situation. That is, everybody has touched on some really powerful things, and as they were speaking, what I was thinking about was it was kind of playing through as a child in the life and where I come from. And I wanted to share that I was never like taken from my family from DSF, or we call it Child Protective Services. I was more or less, I lived out of kind of like a little, I had like a little duffel bag always, or sometimes it was just plastic bags or whatever. But I traveled a lot through 1 week or 2 weeks. I'd be staying at this family's house, and then they would tell me, oh, it's time to go back over here, and I was also experiencing a lot of trauma and a lot of alcoholism in my family, and Like I said in the beginning, you know, I had experienced some sexual trauma and assaults, and just not feeling safe all the time. And something that Rachel and I were speaking about before this was, we were talking about, you know, being a child like her and her caseload, and the children that she works with, and me saying, oh yeah, this is how I felt, or this is, you know, some of the experiences I've had. And then her, you know, saying the differences or the similarities of these children and my own experiences. And something that I really wanted to shed light to is that, you know, or basically kind of like touch on, is the fact that, you know, it is heartbreaking that that even now, like on the reservation, like I see it a lot. Like you know, I'm a family member of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and and I also do advocating for missing and murdered Indigenous women and people, relatives. We see this so often with the girls and the young people. You know, their parents now on social media can post a picture. I haven't heard from my daughter, or I haven't seen my son in so many days, and they're not on social media, which is abnormal. We can't get a hold of them, and that will go like wildfire all throughout social media. I mean, it'll go on MMIW pages, and groups all over, and it'll be all over social media. And in several instances, um, the parents will hear from the child or the youth, because, you know, they're embarrassed, or maybe they lost their phone, or in some instances, but this isn't always the case. And so that is helpful, one thing that we have today going for us. But the other thing is that you know, social media is also part of that. It's part of that trafficking web, where especially Instagram, and also, like, you know, I think, you know, TikTok and different things. I mean, you can go on these sites, and you see the influence that these uh, platforms can have on our youth in our community. And it was really interesting that even though we have like social media platforms to uh, show and talk about these issues, and we're like being more vocal, and we have all these, you know, youth kind of like using these platforms to speak out against this stuff, and we have women, and we have all this stuff, but we also have predators, those that prey upon our children and our women. And really interesting, I was watching something right before this on trafficking, and these traffickers were like all masked up and covered up, and they were asked like why do they target women in America? And they said because women in America are well, they basically said pretty demoralizing things, that we're lonely, and that we just need to talk and have somebody listen. They degraded us basically, and I was thinking that is just how traffickers are, and they basically use these platforms to target our people, and traffickers are just traffickers. But I think what lays it out for us, or what makes it so hard for us, is because we have the issues of jurisdiction, and we have the legal issues. um, One of the things that I experienced as a youth is that I didn't have anybody really, um, essentially, like, I think I had one experience with one of my childhood counselors. She was native, and I won't say her name, but she was the youth native counselor in in junior high, and she had asked me, because I think I would go to school and I would like sleep, and I can't even remember what all I was like, but I know that I was harboring all these secrets. And she had asked me, you know, what was going on. And I remember one time trying to share with her, and I just knew that I was going to be in trouble, and I begged her to not say anything, and to not repeat what I had shared with her, because I didn't want my family to be angry with me. Um, you know, I did stay with people that weren't in my family, that were outside of my family, that took me in, and the outcome was still the same. You know, I think that every issue or every part of my life that you know, where that path just kind of led me into these other areas of being trafficked and things, you know. And I look at the programs that we have today on and off the reservation. I really want to applaud the Kaya program, the grandmother program. There's a program here where they have a Kaya program, and that means grandmother. And over where I'm from, grandmother, the term grandmother is, it could be Kathla, it could be Allah, or, you know, even aunties. So there's all kinds of ways that we can support these youth. I think that we do need an overhaul, like Lissa said. The overhaul is that that we're on our reservations, we're more concerned with you know, making our casinos big and fancy and putting money into these type of things, rather than really putting in resources for youth and youth programs, and also like how we're gonna address this issue overall. Um, you know, there's so much to be said, and each one of the sisters that have spoken have said a lot, and I myself am just blown away by all the things that are that each one of the sisters have shared, especially because our youth, um, the homelessness here in Seattle and even on the Yakima Indian Reservation, um, it is extremely heartbreaking. I've had the opportunity, unfortunate, but to go do searches for, and what does youth mean? I mean, you know, what I witnessed out here in Seattle is that several of these youth age out at the age of 18, and when they age out, uh, they kind of like fall out of like their comfort zone. I mean, are you really an adult at the age of 18? But what I seen out on the streets, and in the tent, the the tent areas where there's a lot of tents, was so heartbreaking, that each one of these young people could have been my son, and could have been my daughter. They were so young and living in really you know, heartbreaking surroundings, a lot of garbage, rain, and when I go back to the reservation, I really noticed the amount of young people that are out on the streets and walking these streets. And you know, it's an issue that we need to pay attention as a whole, and figure out how we can put back, how we can contribute to this, and how we can, with the prevention work. I mean, just, we have so much work to do as a community. I really love what Rachel said about everybody partnering with uh, grassroots organizations, even implementing in their programs, like volunteers from the community, um, you know, men and women to that want to come in and have a positive impact with these youth. Um, my hands are up to all the Native programs that do this. I'm thinking of Clear Sky, here in Seattle with Sarah Sense Wilson. She does some great work with the youth, and I'm so appreciative of everything that she represents with the youth and the work that she puts in with the youth, and just all the other programs. Thank you all, each and every one of you, and that is my 15 minutes. And thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Roxanne. So we're going to transition over to our question and answer portion. So if everyone on the Zoom could turn on their cameras. When I ask a question, we'll just kind of popcorn it. So anyone who feels compelled to answer, please do. And so, Roxanne, you touched on this a little bit, but one kind of repetitive question we've had on the Facebook Live is what can I do to help? What can people who are sitting here watching this live stream today do to help, and what kind of change is needed? Roxanne, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I honestly feel like what community? I think that it's us, it's Indian people, it's Native people. It can't change unless we as a people acknowledge the issue and we work on it as a whole. Like I think the way that things work is through, I think oftentimes the funds are misappropriated. They're misused for youth, and we deal with these kind of things. I think that, you know, I have a responsibility too. You know, I've been reached out to several times by Sarah Sense Wilson to tutor or do things for the youth, and it's way north, and it's just hard for me to get to. But I also know about, like what Chelsea mentioned, you know, about La Batea. I think La Batea is an amazing place for youth. I've I've done ceremony out there with them. I think there's so many ways that we can, but it starts with us, right? We have to seek out these things and how we can contribute. And I think that's an individual journey. I think one thing I'd like to say is that families back home tend to hide someone's child when they're on runaway. And I don't think that that's okay. I don't think that it's okay for you to take somebody's child and hide them while they're on runaway. That's one of the things that I see happening on the res. Like it's just normalized for children to be homeless, living from house to house. And this is like the point of where these children are put in harm's way. When none of us do anything to protect this child, whether they're protecting them from the family or whatever, it's just to look the other way and not do nothing is not okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Did anybody else want to answer that question?
What was the question?
So the question was, what can people who are listening to this webinar tonight do to help, and what kind of changes are needed?
If you're non-native, you're a white person wanting to help, put your money where your mouth is, donate to all these orgs we were just now talking about. And man, you Lisa and Auntie, I mean, Rachel, that was fire. All that information was so vital. And Auntie, you know, Lisa and Roxanne, what you guys mentioned about the tribes doing more, like you're right. Like instead of our huge powwows that we be, you know, pre-COVID, you know, all the huge powwows, and where is our money going? These huge big casinos, and you know, that's right. It's up to leadership, and it does start with tribal council. It does start with leadership to make these changes that are needed. That's happening on and off the reservation. That's all I got for now.
So I'll share something that I do know that does work. I have a friend, and this friend told me that they gathered a group of women to go visit a youth that was in the hospital. And what they did with her is they went and they beaded or they brought her food, or they just went to sit with her. And it was because of the love that they have within them, and they know that these children need some support, right? I think everybody needs to know what they're capable of doing and what their boundaries are. Because oftentimes I think we really want to get into the work, but it's so overwhelming and it's so upsetting. And so, you know, there are always going to be families in need. If you have a relationship with those specific families in your community, I would say start there. Because typically what happens is it starts to snowball and things will, you know, everybody needs support. Of course, on a systemic level, we need money, right? Everybody needs money, but that money to be able to be used without all of these barriers and this red tape. Like for instance, Lissa, who's not getting any funding, there's many families that are out there doing that. And even a lot of those families just barely make, you know, money to support themselves. So they don't qualify for welfare or even SNAP, right? So there's families like that all over the place. And just having relationships with them and asking them what they need. There are very simple things that we can start doing. You know, for our relatives who are unsheltered, collecting socks for women, feminine products, condoms, those types of things, they go a very, very long way. And that is something I think that most of us are able to do.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, please do.
I'd like to add to that Rachel actually has been instrumental. If like a couple months back, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I can't even put a time frame, but I was called upon to visit a youth that was I can't disclose the situation or the circumstances, but you know, at the time I was so scared, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I could handle this. I don't know if this is something that I should be doing. And I, you know, called Rachel and said, you know, I'm going to be going into this place, and you know, what do I do? What if she doesn't like me? What if she doesn't want to be visited by me? Or what if I don't know what to say? What if I'm, you know, my biggest fear was her not liking me. And Rachel gave me some really great feedback. And one of the things, you know, that I think that we can do, and I just have to say this, is like be sure and one of the things that I was told is to not get into something that I cannot keep my word. I cannot keep my word. That is something that, you know, I think that when we're working with the youth, or when we're working with youth that are going through things, like to always go into that with a level of commitment and honesty.
Mhm. Yes, for sure. So this question, Lissa, you might be best able to answer, but there's been some comments on the Facebook about people who are interested in becoming a foster parent. So what kind of advice would you ladies give to somebody who's interested in beginning that process?
I would say contact your tribe and ask to be foster care certified. Now, there's a lot of families, you know, there's a lot of people that say, well, they don't think they can do it or whatever. I said that too, but like after this experience, I have just really, it's crystal clear to me that we need foster homes. We need good foster homes. You know, there's a lot of times where I feel guilty right now because I feel that, you know, with my history of use and abuse, that I'm actually parenting for once. And, you know, 5 kids and 1 adoptee later, I feel sometimes that I'm giving a lot more to my foster kids now than I actually even gave to my own kids. So it's been an interesting experience, and I'm glad my children support what I'm doing. But I'm a work in progress too, and I just really saw the need, the actual need. Like, I am so protective of these two boys now. I couldn't even imagine if somebody did something to them, or if some court order said something had to be done differently, because knowing what they've been through, um, and knowing how far they've come in the short time that they've been with me, that there's such a great need. Like, I just can't even stress, like, it's it's so deep and it's so needed that once you get in, there's just no backing out. Like, the fight's on. I can't believe, for what these two boys have gone through. I couldn't imagine what any other kid has gone through. Um, I also was in the foster care system when my trafficker got a hold of me. So I was on the tail end of my foster care. I was about to, age out in a few years. But nobody came looking for me. Nobody knew what happened to me. Nobody, I don't think, really cared to that system. My family did, but it was out of sight, out of mind. So yeah, there's a lot of foster kids out there that just need good homes. And you get this new foster mom family where all the moms get together now, and we kind of share information, like, is this what you're going through? Oh, things like that. And it's amazing to hear everyone's story of, you know, where they're going. And it's different with every kid that you get, but the attachment that you have, it's been a hell ride, but it's been a beautiful experience at the same breath. So um if you can foster, a lot of people think they can't foster because they might have something on their criminal record. I had something on my criminal record. I'm still fostering. Um, a lot of people think a lot of things. You're never going to know until you give it a try. And so, yeah, I couldn't even imagine where these boys would be right now. And I don't even want to think about it. So, I mean, it's kind of like our kids are making us level up, and we need to be more community about it. We need to act as an Indigenous person, and grab our own kids. These are our relatives, every single one of them. So it's just kind of a duty, I think, that we all have. So I would contact, if you're a Native, contact your tribe, and see if you could get, but I do believe that it goes from tribe to tribe too. So, but I would start there.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to address that question? The question was, what advice would you give to someone interested in becoming a foster parent?
Check your motives. That's what comes to my mind, is check your motives, like, and just making sure that this is really what you want. I hate to say it. I mean, I feel bad to say this, but I actually have nieces that have lost their children while giving, just having their babies, and they've had them taken away. And these are nieces that maybe I've seen them when they were like young girls, like 5, 10, even 16, but I haven't seen them in several years, and they lost their children. I have received something from them saying, are you a family member? Uh, and it was something that I really had to internalize. And could I do this? Was I in that position to do this? And so my hands go up to Lisa and anybody else that could be a foster parent. Um, I don't think that it's for everyone. I think that it's something that you really have to have in your heart and be prepared to do. I also think that there's, kind of what comes to mind is the story of this young boy, and I usually have his name right at the tip of my tongue, but I think that, and just a little bit off that subject, is thinking about what Lissa is talking about nobody checking on these children, nobody wondering like where they're at, how they're being treated. Um, it makes me sad because so many of our youth, that I are in these circumstances or in these situations, you know, I really think that working together with survivors, these organizations, people that work with youth and foster care system, whether it's tribal, affiliated, or non, I really think that the level of them working with survivors and actual natives, not just one token native or whatever, but actual native people, I think that this service could be, um, better for our youth. I've witnessed programs, where the people that do this work do it as a job and their heart is not in it, their spirit is not in it. And I think that that's another way that, that programs could do better. They can do better by working hand in hand with community members and being transparent.
Beautiful. Well, I know we could keep talking about this for hours and hours, but unfortunately, we are at the end of our time today. There's still lots of questions in the Facebook feed, but I hope we were able to answer most of them through our discussion. So just wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences, and really being survivor leaders. It's so important to have that, and I look up to all of you ladies. So thank you so much for your work. So for those of you tuning in, this is the end of our Survivors Leadership Council's Trafficking Awareness Month, but the trafficking awareness doesn't end when January ends. So please take a look at all of the webinars we've done throughout this month, poster series, and just really be looking for ways that you can get involved on this issue year round. So thank you. Have a good night.